Oh boy, this is a video that I wanted to make for a very long time. And I always sort of make videos inside my head and think, well, is this a video I want to make, yes or no? Am I saying the things that I want to say, yes or no? And for a very long time, the thing that I thought about in my head in this video is bashing modern gaming, talking about how crap modern gaming is. And then, sort of after half an hour of bashing, I'll talk about why the sixth generation of consoles, in my personal opinion, this is just an opinion, is the best console era ever, basically the golden age of gaming, in my personal view. And I didn't want that. We all know that I hate microtransactions, I hate 60 gigabyte patches, I hate DLCs, I hate games that are not on disc or partially on disc, like Hogwarts Legacy. I just hate games that are unfinished, even broken at launch, unplayable at launch, like Cyberpunk. And eventually these games may become very good, but it just always leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Like, I remember a time where that didn't happen. I remember a time when you go to the store and you buy a game, it's done. And the game may suck or may be unplayable, then the game sucks and is unplayable forever, at least on original hardware. Or you have masterpieces or incredible good games that were, test of time and even are as fun as they were back in the day. Now, that's kind of what I want to start with, because I already said what I really hate about modern gaming, and then we also have the woke stuff and the censorship, especially from Sony. And of course, don't forget the huge developing cost making a AAA game. AAA gaming nowadays costs like what? 150, 200, 300 million dollars to make a game. No wonder a company like Microsoft or Sony or Activision are making one game and just piling it up with microtransactions, DLCs, or it has to be so freaking good that it's going to sell a bazillion copies like Uncharted or Horizon. And what happens, at least in my personal view, is they're doing the same stuff. Is Spider-Man 2 really that different compared to Spider-Man 1 on PS4 and PS5? Is Horizon Forbidden West really that different than Horizon Zero Dawn? And you can definitely say, well, Claude, is Ratchet and Clank 1, or let's say Ratchet and Clank 2, really different than Ratchet and Clank 1? Well, yes. Is Jak and Daxter 2 or Jak 2 really that much different than Jak and Daxter? Well, yes, it actually is. Was Silent Hill 3 really different than Silent Hill 2? Well, no, perhaps not. But the thing is, and that's very important, at least to me, they were different games in different universes. Where, yes, Horizon Forbidden West is in the same area of the world, it still is the same universe. It's not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. Modern gaming still has some incredible franchises like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Horizon, Uncharted. I love these games, but it just doesn't really hold a candle, at least in nowadays gaming. How many good exclusives are there on PS5? Let's be really honest. Almost nothing. Now, why I think that the fifth and sixth generation, and for it also Super Nintendo up until PS2, at least, and Xbox and GameCube, are the golden age of gaming to me personally. A lot of people say, well, because that's nostalgia, Claude. That is because you grew up with that type of era of gaming, and that is why you think it's the best. Well, it's not really true, is it? Nostalgia is a part of it, that's definitely true, but it's not 100%. It may be a small fraction of nostalgia because guess what? I actually never really played that many Super Nintendo, PS1, and PS2 games. I only had a few games. And most of the sixth generation and even fifth generation of games that I played them for the first time right now. I'm playing Ape Escape 3 at the moment, or Onimusha 1, I beaten last year. God of War 2, I have played and beaten last year. Metal Gear Solid 3, one of the best games I've ever played. I have beaten that game 2 weeks ago. Wild Arms 3, played it last week. And they are all better than anything I've played in the last a lot of years in modern gaming, except for Dragon Quest XI. That game is absolutely fantastic, and Dragon Quest XI is basically an old game. It's an old RPG in a modern take, in a modern jacket, and I wish they would do more. Now, you could say, well, Claude, indie games. There are a lot of indie games out there. Yes, that is completely true, but are indie games considered AAA? Are they the big guys out there? They perhaps are selling a few millions of copies. Do not get me wrong. There are some really great games like Sea of Stars or Moonlighter. I love Moonlighter. That you could potentially say, well, Claude, Moonlighter sold more than any of your PS2 games. Yes, but it's a different era. Let's be really honest, it is a different era in gaming. And for a lot of gamers, not including me, for a lot of gamers, indie games are not real games. They are, but they're mostly smaller games. For example, Prince of Persia, where's Prince of Persia here? The Prince of Persia trilogy, there were 3 games. They were AAA considered, I think. They were really hyped back then. The first, second, and the third one. They were really hyped, and I'm not entirely sure if they are really AAA, but for that time period, they were probably AAA. The quality was great, the graphics are great, and people seem to really love these games. I've actually never played them. Now, in today's gaming space, this would be an indie game. If you would release Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time in the way that it's being, released now, it's an indie game. Hey, the newest Prince of Persia game is basically sort of a smaller 2D sort of indie game. It's not an indie game. I know what indie means, but you know what I mean. It's not a blockbuster AAA game where Prince of Persia on the PlayStation 2, or let's say the 6th generation of consoles, was definitely a blockbuster. It was a very hyped game. Same goes with maybe stuff like God of War. Same goes with Ratchet and Clank. Now, you could potentially say, well, Claude, Ratchet and Clank wasn't from Sony, and it wasn't really a AAA franchise. Well, I mean, it's still an IP from Sony, and I'm not entirely sure if that was considered AAA back then, yes or no. I don't know. The only thing I do know is that Ratchet & Clank is being considered on PS2 to be a pretty big player. Same goes with the Sly Raccoon games 1, 2, and 3. I only played 1. I have played 2. I never played 3, so another few games that I really need to play. Same goes with Tomb Raider, etc., etc. And I also really specifically want to talk about Sony, because Sony is sort of being well known, at least in the PS3 and PS4 generation, that they produce a lot of quality games. And they do. They do. Even though I do believe, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, they're basically doing the same stuff. Ghost of Tsushima, open world. Spider-Man, open world. The new Wolverine game's probably going to be open world. And they're also doing a lot of almost exactly the same sort of sequels. Now, again, you can potentially say, Claude, but you also have Ratchet & Clank 1 and 2, 3, and Deadlock. You have, God of War 1 and 2. You have Champions of NORAD 1 and 2. They are basically the same game. Yes, gameplay-wise, they are basically the same game. But Sony was really pouring out games like it was nobody's business. If it was first party or second party, it doesn't matter to me, to be really honest. Ratchet & Clank is not on Xbox, it's not on Nintendo, it is an exclusive. So to me, that is basically what that means. You had stuff like Champions of NORAD from Sony. Do you really believe Sony would still make a game like this? Probably not, or release like a really small digital game. Do you honestly believe that Sony would still make a blockbuster Ape Escape game? Because these games were, Ape Escape is maybe one of the smaller games, but stuff like Ratchet and Clank and God of War, they were really hyped up. You had the Siren franchise, Siren 1 and 2, are also from Sony. I think they were from Sony. Sort of the Silent Hill, I want to say wannabes, but they're not wannabes, clones, horror genre, whatever. Sony in the sixth generation of consoles were really pouring out a huge amount of games, almost never seen ever again. You could say, well, Claude, Nintendo is pouring out a lot of games on the Switch, yes, but how many of them are ports, remakes, reboots, and especially ports? If you really consider how many Switch games are really Switch exclusives, it is still a lot, but not as much as what Sony was pouring out. Now, I don't have everything. You also have the golf games from Sony. You had, of course, Gran Turismo. You had Tourist Trophy. And not just Sony. It seems that almost every company out there, both big and small, were producing a shit ton of games. It really felt like when you open a magazine that it was just cracked full of exciting games that would come out at the end of the year. And nowadays, let's be really honest, and again, I know there are indie games out there, but if you really open up a magazine and you're thinking, oh, what is the next blockbuster? What is the next blockbuster? Tell me, what will actually come out at the end of the year besides FIFA? Or it's now called FC. What is actually coming out? Leave in the comments below. What is actually coming out at the end of the year that you're like, oh, I want to get this game right now? And even if there is one or two, it is just one or two. Back then, it felt, and I think it is, a huge amount of games. Both big and small. And you had franchises that will never be made ever again in this sort of day and age, again, by big developers. Stuff like Time Splitters 2. Have you seen the gameplay of the last Time Splitters that they wanted to make? It's basically a Fortnite clone. Oh, I'm so happy they never released that game. But Time Splitters 2 is one of my most treasured memories of playing with friends. I probably spent like 300-400 hours playing Time Splitters 2. It is so good, and it is absolutely packed full of content, guys. Packed full of content. No DLC. You can actually make your own maps. Nowadays, you have to buy your maps. You have every genre that you can think of, even roguelike. Yes, there are roguelike games even back then. Roguelike is nothing new. You even had Soul-like. Soul-like games are nothing new. Kingsfield is the first Soul-like game ever produced, also basically from software. And you could potentially say that like stuff like Armored Core are sort of Soul-like, not literally how we know Soul-like, but they're just very difficult, very mysterious and stuff, especially the Kingsfield games. And you have stuff like this guy now. This guy is still being made, true, but one of the other sort of aspects, at least to me, is why gaming back then felt better than now is everything was new, everything was fresh. It felt fresh, it felt new. We saw the Nintendo, and then we saw the Super Nintendo, and it was 2D at its best, and then you had 3D, and like, wow, sure, PlayStation 1 graphics and stuff, and Nintendo 64 graphics now may look like crap to you. To me, it still looks good, but to you. But back then, you cannot deny it. It was mind-blowing. Seeing a game and playing a game, my couch is cracking. Seeing and playing a game like Final Fantasy VII was absolutely mind-blowing back then. And then you switch to PS2, and the difference between these generations was phenomenal. It was just boom, bam, like, holy damn, it cannot get better than this. You had Final Fantasy X that absolutely blew my mind when I was a kid. I bought Final Fantasy VI, or my dad bought Final Fantasy VI on PlayStation 1 because you had a Final Fantasy X demo. And the first time I saw that, that CGI intro and you saw the graphics, you're like, wow, holy damn, this is light years better than PlayStation 1. And let's be really honest now, PS4 and 5, is it really that big of a difference? I mean, isn't that the fact that a lot of these games are made on PS4 and Xbox One, whatever, and PS5 because the difference isn't that big anymore? Which game does really wow me? I mean, yes, graphics on God of War looks incredible on Ragnarok, but the original God of War, God of War 2018, also looks incredible. Yes, Horizon Forbidden West looks amazing. Well, Horizon Zero Dawn also looks amazing. But back then, everything felt sort of new and fresh, and you had new and exciting franchises, kind of like Onimusha, kind of like where is it, Devil May Cry, and you had games like Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, and to me at least, it was like, wow, I can finally play sort of a modern Diablo on the PlayStation 2. You will never see Sony make games like that ever again. We finally have a smaller game called Astrobot, and they're still asking $60 for it. And they already basically announced that the game won't be long. Even though it has 80 levels, the game won't be very long. So everything felt new and fresh, to me at least, and I think to everybody. And after the sixth generation of consoles, everything just felt bigger and better looking. I mean, Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, and Uncharted 4 just looks better, and they're incredible games, by the way. But the gameplay didn't feel much different. And I think that's also what, for example, Ratchet and Clank is one of my favorite franchises of all time, and yet the last sort of two games I played, I'm like, I already done this. I already played this type of gameplay years ago on the PS2, and on the PS3, it still felt exciting, it still felt new and fresh, but after all those years, after all these games on Ratchet and Clank I have played, it just feels the same. I would love to have a game like Onimusha come to life again. And again, AAA development, or at least AA development, not a really small indie game, just a really big blockbuster. And, well, you have Neo, and I love Neo. I love Neo. And I think that's also a really good example, because I love Neo, but Neo 2 already felt kind of like more of the same, kind of like I've already played this, I've already seen this. Same goes with Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. I played these games, I love them, and I really played a lot of Elden Ring, but at that point I was already sort of burned out on how a soul-like game from software plays. And I think also a really good example is Yakuza. Yakuza 1 and 2 were on the PlayStation. These were great games, and they were fresh, they were new, like, whoa, GTA, but then in Japan, it's really cool, and it has a beat-em-up fighting style, and has a really big storyline, very interesting, AAA quality. It may not have been a AAA game, but at least it felt like it was AAA quality. And now you have so many Yakuza games, so many, and I've played almost all of them to a point where I can't play it anymore. It is too much. And if Yakuza would have been a different, it may not even need to have different main characters. I love Kazuma Kiryu and his bunch of weirdos, but just a different city. But every time you go to Kamurocho, and at a certain point I'm like, I have already seen this. I have already played this. I just cannot play it anymore. And Ratchet and Clank, Ratchet and Clank 2, Ratchet and Clank 3, Ratchet and Clank Deadlock, and all Ratchet and Clank games, by the way, at least have different environments, different storylines, different characters, even though, of course, a lot of characters are still returning. And I think I actually left one of the biggest players out in this field of incredible games is GTA. From GTA 2 to GTA 3, the difference was mind-blowing. Just so big that it changed gaming forever. Everybody wanted to be like GTA 3. And then Vice City came out, and it may still have been the same gameplay, but it felt better, it felt more unique, and I love the era of Vice City. And then you had San Andreas in the same freaking time frame. How long are people waiting for GTA 6? How long are we waiting for GTA 6? So many years. They made it on PS3. There are no new GTAs on PS4. And we're probably going to have one GTA for the next 20 years with GTA 6. But at that time period, because it didn't cost $300 or $400 million to make and 6 years to make, you had developers just pushing out games almost every year of really good quality. And San Andreas, again, may have been the same battle system and the same gameplay, but you could get fat, you could get skinny, you could train, and you could get buffed up, you could customize almost all the vehicles. Tell me any open world game right now that can do that. Tell me any open world game where you can get big, you can get small, you could get fat, you could get strong, you could cut your hair, okay, maybe Red Dead Redemption 2, but it boggles my mind why in a lot of ways the graphics has improved, but the gameplay has decreased. The gameplay has been getting boring and more boring, less interactive. And it's weird. Stuff like Fable, I played it last year. It's a small-ass game. Even I was shocked at how small the game is. But it is packed full of content. Absolutely packed full of content. You could play Fable 2 or 3 times with a completely different character and a completely different playstyle. And your character will actually look different. Tell me any open world game that has that you change the character. You can look evil, you can look bad. And I have to mention one thing, one little elephant in the room before you all were like, what about PS3? You had Infamous, the franchise, you had the Uncharted franchise, you had this franchise, you had the MotorStorm franchise. Yes, I know. That's why I'm telling you. Oh, that is my girlfriend. No, I want to finish the game. I want to finish the movie. I want to finish the video. Basically, this is what I wanted to talk about. To be really honest, because I have to open the door or she's going to kill me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and tell me what you think about the 6th generation of consoles. Oop.